Hey guys, welcome back to more real estate drama stories. In this video, a bunch of squatters stole my home and I ended up homeless. Let's dive right into the video. For squatters, the pandemic was a great opportunity to get away with things. The police had bigger things to worry about, and the pauses on so many things made it easy to take advantage of the system. So that's exactly what happened with the tenant who I had renting out the basement apartment in my home too. Ever since my husband died, money had been tight and the apartment used to be his little man cave. But it was a good place to rent out and get some extra money to keep things going. A man moved in and everything seemed okay until about 2 months later when the pandemic hit. With one big legal change basically making it impossible to evict somebody, he stopped paying me money knowing that I couldn't do anything about it. Then he started sneaking other people into the apartment who by the time I found out were claiming squatter rights. Then I started finding drugs or evidence of them, pipes and little empty baggies with powder still left in them. It was just horrible. They were absolutely trashing the place and police couldn't help me with everything else going on. My tipping point was seeing one of the squatters having a gun on him. I didn't feel safe in my own home anymore and had no choice but to abandon it. I did not have anywhere else to go, so I started sleeping in my car, going to food banks to try and get stuff to eat. Ironically, I was the one now homeless and could only watch as my beautiful home was turning into nothing more than a drug den. I was speaking to a lawyer whose main advice was to keep an eye on the house and take notes on everything I saw. The courts were not gonna evict him and the rest of the squatters until things calmed down with the virus, plus courts were backed up for months anyway, so it wasn't gonna be a long wait. I kept living out of my car, which was not easy for a woman in her 50s. My back was killing me and I spent my days just going from meal to meal looking for places to charge my phone. It was absolute hell with everything being closed down, and then there was the fear that I was constantly being exposed to this virus because I couldn't properly be on a lockdown in my home like everybody else was meant to be at this point. It felt eerie having my car parked in what used to be a busy lot, but it was now just empty. I was also parking near the house and keeping an eye out for things. It hurt my heart to see what they were doing to my home. Windows were smashed and replaced with just wood covering it. People were coming and going, most likely to buy drugs. I wanted to see the damage that was done to the inside of my home, so after a while of getting up my bravery, I went to unlock the door. My key didn't work, they changed the locks on the house, so now I could not even enter my own home. During all of this, I had tried calling the original tenant a few times, hoping that I could work things out. For the most part, he didn't answer, but on this one occasion, he actually picked up the phone and I was in shock from it. Me, hello? Tenants, stop calling me. Me, please just take your friends and leave. I won't even press charges or talk to the police or anything. I just want my house back. Tenant, it's not your house anymore. Get that through your head. Don't call me anymore because it's our house now and you just need to accept that. Find somewhere else to live. Wander the streets, I really don't care. Me, why are you doing this? Tenant, an opportunity opened itself and I would have to be an idiot not to take it. He hung up after that and I was never able to get him to answer the phone again. In fact, a month later his phone number was disconnected and he probably changed his number. Sitting and waiting for something to happen is one of the worst things imaginable. Especially when I didn't know what the outcome was gonna be. For all I knew, I could get sick and end up in the hospital or dead. Very slowly though, the world seems to start to return to normal and I knew that once eviction was open again, I could maybe get something moving. I was still speaking to that lawyer who seemed sure that we could get rid of the squatters. It was just gonna be a slow process. This guy knew what he was doing and managed to get all of the utilities changed into his name, meaning these were squatters with electricity, water, etc. I don't know how he managed to do that without my consent, but this clearly was not his first time doing something like this. To be honest, I used to always believe in karma and that if you do bad things, it will come around to bite you in the ass. Seeing them basically win kind of took that idea out of my head though, since I was the one getting the bad side of karma when I didn't think I did anything wrong. Turns out that I just had to be a little more patient because there was one thing that managed to get them all forced out of the house without a proper eviction. They had destroyed the house so badly that the state had officially condemned it. Nobody was legally allowed to live in a condemned home, so all of them were forced out of it. They did not want to go, of course, not caring about the state of the house, so police had to come and force them out, arresting a couple of them for drugs that were found on them, the tenant professionally slipping away before the police had even come, making it seem like the house was already condemned and a bunch of homeless people just moved in. However, since the house was in my name, I was the one ending up in front of a judge over Zoom to try and explain how I allowed my house to get into that kind of state. I told him about the squatters and that they had changed the locks and I'd been living out of my car just waiting until I could evict them. The judge was sympathetic but couldn't allow me to live in a condemned home. He told me that if I cleaned the place up and fixed it, he could try and rush another inspection for me. Police got the door open for me so I could get inside and see the damage. Honestly, it was horrible, like I don't even know how human beings could do this kind of thing, even by accident. Walls were covered in graffiti, some had gaping holes in them, like somebody punched it a ton or took a sledgehammer, and there were also some suspicious colored smears on the wall that I don't even want to describe the smell of to you. The floors that had carpeting were either totally ripped up or had a bunch of holes in them. Vermin were living in the house, so an exterminator was high on the list of people that I needed to call. Broken windows, aside from the one that I already knew about, the kitchen was just no. That was probably the worst room of it all. Despite having water, I guess none of them heard of doing dishes. The floors were covered in garbage, food and drug-related items. I had to be really careful where I stepped so I didn't end up getting hurt with a needle. Plus, who knows what they could have had that getting stuck with their used needles would expose me to. Finally though, all of my things were either destroyed or just gone. Things like my clothes and jewelry I can guess ended up getting pawned so they had money for more drugs. With things like my TV and computer being smashed. My furniture being torn and unusable. I had no idea where I was even gonna start with fixing all of this. I had been telling my story all online while it was happening, and at this point I was posting photos and showing how badly they ruined my home to the point of it being condemned. I just needed to have some way to vent things out and talk to people. The neighbors especially were confused, and once they heard what happened, it made a lot more sense that it was actually squatters doing all the damage and not me. What I didn't expect was all my friends and neighbors to help me get my house back into a state where I could live in it again, and they showed up wearing masks and ready to help in any way they could, mostly with cleaning and just getting everything in bags to be thrown out. I could see the floors again. One of the men was a carpenter and helped fix the holes in the walls, and I got an exterminator to get rid of the vermin and was able to get a new carpet installed. I found some used furniture on an online marketplace, plus got donations from people that had things they didn't need or use anymore. I was basically crying because of all the help I was getting from people and the idea of being able to not sleep in my car anymore. I passed the inspection and was now allowed to live in my home again, getting all the utilities back into my name, but now that I was somewhat settled again, I wanted to take care of one more thing. The old tenant. Sure, my house was fixed up, but none of this would have happened if it wasn't for him. And he was off somewhere, possibly tricking another person and doing the whole thing again. I was not gonna let that happen. I had his information from when he rented from me and was able to hand all of that over to the police. I was suing him for the damage done to my home since I could not really sue him for squatting. I also told the police that I was fairly certain he was a drug dealer and had an illegal weapon on him. It took time to track him down, but once it did, everything hit the fan. The police picked him up from an abandoned house he was living in and got him arrested on drug charges, possession and, well, possession with the intent to sell. Plus, they found a gun on him that he did not have a license or registration for, so basically, he was in big trouble. And now that they found him, they could add the charge for destruction of property. I was taking him to court for the damages, even though I doubt he had any assets that were not drug-related and taken by the police. Still, I showed pictures of the condemned home and what he had done to it. Also that he sold off my possessions and destroyed my entire house just to sneak away and not face any consequences. He was ordered to pay me money, which he didn't have all of. I was able to get a small amount at least, which would help me go to pawn shops and try to get myself some new things. For criminal court, he had zero chance to get away with any of it. The only defense he had for the destruction of property was claiming that the other people squatting there did it. But he let them in and seemed to be the leader of the group. Him changing the utilities into his name actually caused him to have some liability, despite no direct evidence. So I guess doing that was not a smart move after all. I knew that with the increased danger they were trying to keep as many people out of the prison as possible, so for a non-violent offense he probably would have been on house arrest or probation or something. Since he had no actual home and was considered a huge flight risk though, he had to go to prison. Seeing the person that ruined my life for about a year finally get justice made me feel better. I had my home again and I was never gonna rent that apartment out to anybody again. The last thing I wanted was a repeat of what happened with him. At least I can live in a home again and share my story with everybody about what might have been the worst case of a squatter ever. A squatter that literally turned a homeowner homeless. Edit. A lot of you were asking me whether this happened in a Western country. I don't want to give a super precise answer here to prevent getting doxxed. I'll say this much though. I was born and I'm still living in Southeast Asia and my case was fairly popular in the local news of my country. Let's just say there's a crap ton of corruption here and my case was not the only one that happened during the pandemic. And here, ripe stars, if you enjoyed the title story, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel because we are getting very close to 130,000 subscribers. Thank you so much, and the next one is a fantastic revenge story. This is less of a revenge story and more of a will I be the a-hole if I report him? So to make a long story short, I was driving parallel to two cars on a 2-lane road. It was the first snow of the winter today and I was driving with my wife back from breakfast. The car in front in the left lane began to brake and the vehicle directly behind him started to cross into my lane, essentially pushing me into the curb and on top of it. I honked at him but he drove off. I followed him to a nearby parking lot and said, "Don't know if you noticed, but you ran me off the road." Rather than apologizing, his response was, "I don't know if you noticed, but the car in front of me was braking hard. It's winter, it's gonna happen. F an idiot." The damage to my car was minimal, I think, so I didn't get his insurance info and he probably would have declined to give it away. I did some research and found out his business license is currently expired, but he is still operating his business. I found out he is still operating his business because he posts pictures of the homes he has completed on social media, but again, he has an expired license. His license plate was somewhat unique, so I connected it directly to the business. The guy was such an a-hole, I'm thinking of just reporting him for operating a company without the proper licensing. Had he shown even a slight amount of remorse, I wouldn't even be considering this, but based on how he interacted with me, I almost don't think he should be in business anyway. So, will I be the a-hole if I decide to report his business? Should I? Should I not? Is it even worth it? Is it even legal to report a business like this? And here, ripe stars, if you would have been in that situation, what would you have done? Would you have reported him? Let me know in the comments. The next one is another revenge story. So I work at a plant nursery that has me out in the field all day. At lunch we come into the lunchroom that has a large upright fridge, much like you would find in a deli or a gas station. I also live in Texas, so it's blazing hot for a little background. About a month after I started there, I started bringing my lunch because it was more convenient than going out to grab something. I had a lunchbox that was very clearly labeled as mine, as well as being the only camo lunchbox in there. Doubles as a lightweight beer cooler during deer season, by the way, so the first week or two go fine, but about midway through, the third week I start noticing things go missing. First it was a bag of chips or a Slim Jim, just a little stuff, and then it started being one of my 3 sandwiches or an entire bowl of roast I made. Now, I'm well known for being incredibly petty, to the point that I have a 14-foot tree on my patio that I dug up kind of petty. I also really like my food, so obviously I had to do something. Well, I'm very unassuming when it comes to my taste in food. I'm just your average white guy. Nothing special except for the fact that I love blazing hot food. So what did I do? I made a super hot curry. Figured that would solve the problem real fast, but no, whoever it was took my curry, ate it and left the empty bowl in the middle of the lunchroom. Okay, so now not only am I petty, but I'm mad too, so that night I went to the store and bought the stuff for tuna sandwiches. I bought all of the stuff except the relish because I decided to make my own. I went out to my garden and started digging through my peppers to make a relish/pico demon child. A combination of purple cayenne, bird's eye chilies, 2 reapers, a ghost and a habanero later, I have a batch of tuna that could eat the steel off the bumper of a truck. Cue the revenge. I happily make my lunch knowing that whoever steals my food may end up having the worst day of their life. I go to work like usual, put my lunchbox up front in plain view instead of trying to hide in the back, and then I go to work. My lunch starts at 1, but there's a lunch that starts at 12:30 and overlaps until 13 o'clock. About 12:45 I hear sirens, it's an ambulance, and I'm like, oh no, what happened? Work around a lot of heavy equipment so a lot can go wrong. But it turns out that the older gentleman that had been taking my food decided to help himself to one of my sandwiches and found out the hard way that he had ulcers. He was in so much pain that a coworker had called the EMT because they didn't know what was wrong with him. So my lunch comes and they are still there trying to help him, so I walk around them, grab my lunchbox and sit down a few tables away in clear view of the old man and the EMT and proceed to eat my other 2 sandwiches like nothing happened. The best part, he never touched my food again. That was 2 years ago, and to this day all of my food is accounted for. He ended up being fine but had to go to the hospital that day to be treated for severe ulcers that had been seriously agitated by that tuna. And the next one is an Am I the A-hole story with an update. I, female 30, don't have the best relationship with my husband's mom. Since day one, she tried to make remarks and compare me to herself. She then tried to get on my good side and started overly praising everything I do and sometimes even copying me, like that one time when she literally dyed her hair purple, just like mine, and when everyone pointed out how ridiculous she looked, she actually blamed me and accused me of trying to make a joke out of her. So anyways, my husband and I took 2 weeks of work to go visit some places out of the country. Tourism, in other words. The thing is, I was the one who saved up for and arranged for the trip. My husband was responsible for booking the tickets. My husband's mom wanted to come along and threw temper tantrums when I said no. She called, texted, sent people to talk to me into letting her come, even threatened to call the police and make some complaint up to get us to stay if she cannot come. My husband said that we should just take her, but I told him he was wrong to tell her about the trip in the first place. He gave me an ultimatum, said he wouldn't go if she cannot come, and I told him I would gladly call his bluff, which made him take his words back and say, "Fine, I will tell her to stop it because we won't take her." Things got quieter, suspiciously quieter. The day of the trip came and we got to the airport at 2 p.m. My husband was walking ahead of me and was looking left and right like he was looking for someone. I asked him, but he didn't respond. He led me to the waiting area and first thing I saw was his mom standing there with her luggage. I froze in my spot. I felt a cold wave washing over me and I was fuming inside. She and my husband were hugging. That's when I quietly turned around and started walking towards the exit. My husband followed me while shouting at me to stop. He tried to stop me, but I told him off the harshest way possible. He tried to say that I was overreacting and that his mom was there anyway and I should let it go and not mess up the trip for us. I told him that he and his mom could still go and that I was going home. I went home and sobbed into my dog's fur for several minutes. It turned out he booked her a ticket without me knowing. An hour later, he came home yelling and raging about how pathetic and spiteful I was to walk out and go home and ruin the trip last minute. I told him he caused this to happen. He said that I was being so hard on his mom. It is ridiculous. I refused to fight anymore, but he kept on berating me and then called my family to tell them that the trip was cancelled and that it was because of me. My family said that I shouldn't have ruined it for myself and should have sucked it up and done my best to enjoy it. Did I really overreact? And yeah, ripe stars, let me know what you think about this in the comments. I would say OP is 100% not the a-hole and definitely did not overreact. I see a lot of red flags in this story, but I'm really curious what you think about it. Comment number 1 on Reddit said, "Trust me, get out now, he is always gonna put his mom before your marriage and it's a battle you're never gonna win." Comment number 2, "Are you sure you want to be married to this man? What's gonna happen if or when you have kids? Is he gonna let her make the decisions? Not the a-hole and you all need marriage counseling. I'm glad that you had a dog for comfort. And if you do divorce, take the dog with you." Comment number 3, "Look, this is some next level boundary stomping. Have you read this really old book called Sons and Lovers by chance? It's classic literature. Your hubby sounds a lot like the protagonist who's in love with his mom. You sound like a hardworking, good and kind person. You can find someone that is willing to set you first in their life." And now we have an update to the story, thankfully, and it reads like this. So for more details about my situation, I gotta admit that my husband's mom favors him over all his siblings. This affected his relationship with them and me as well. He has never seen an issue with how differently his mom treats him. It bothered me and made me feel uncomfortable. The whole dynamic made me feel uncomfortable. Going low contact has never been an option. Like he has to see her or call her every day. Most of his siblings don't talk to him and I 100% believe it is because of his mom's favoritism, like I said. And yes, he does bear some blame for not seeing how wrong this is until this day. In many instances I found myself making excuses for his behavior. Even in my post, I did it spontaneously, and I don't know why, but I guess it's because of how much I love him and because I really wanted to be able to work this type of thing out without letting them affect our marriage. Regarding what happened with the trip, he tried to have a talk with me, and most of what he said came from a place of blame towards me. I just couldn't continue with this argument. I told him I needed space and that I would be going to stay with my sister for a while. And honestly, he didn't take it well. He literally got up from the couch and opened the door, telling me to go right then and there. In that moment, and seeing how he was still not even anywhere near understanding what he has done, just made things perfectly clear to me. I just had pictured years and years of my life being lived like that, and I was like, no, I cannot do that, cannot take any more of it, especially when he keeps focusing on being right every time. And his mom can do no wrong. I'm always the aggressive, crazy, jealous, pathetic overreactor. All these people's opinions, advice and concerns were like a spark, like the wake-up call I really needed. Though I wish that it didn't get this far, but that is what's done is done. Right now I'm staying with my sister. I brought my dog with me as well, and he sent me his last message telling me that I'm the one choosing to end what we had together, but I believe it's the other way around, especially with how he keeps making his mom the victim in this situation. It's become clear now that we keep going in circles with no end in reach, and I'm just so exhausted and overwhelmed. I'm not mad at him and I don't expect him to change, but at least I'm given options to decide what is best for me and my future, even if it is separation and divorce. A big thank you to those who reached out with resources that I feel very lucky to have come across. Just wanted to give you an update since many of you asked for it. And yeah, ripe stars, I would say in that situation, separation and divorce is definitely the way to go, and it's nice that maybe OP can still sort of dodge this bullet. Although I feel it's almost a little bit too late for that, but it's still time to make some positive changes in her life. And the positive change in this case is definitely getting rid of the husband. And yeah guys, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. And also check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on Spotify, Amazon, Audible and other podcast platforms. You will often find exclusive episodes and early access to new content. Furthermore, please check out my Patreon by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or my YouTube membership program for even more exclusive stories. Thank you so much, and I will see you again tomorrow.